So, how does God feel about murderers? Stay tuned to find out. This is one of the most random yet most powerful realizations that I had during my near-death experience 1 year ago in 2017. My name's Susan. If you don't know me, welcome. Thanks for being on my channel. I was born clairvoyant. I had a heck of a time growing up. I manifested a bazillion dark nights of the soul and didn't know why. Finally, during my near-death experience, it crystallized. And now I've taken all these drastic human experiences and I help awakening women master their intuition, know their purpose, and explore their spiritual gifts. So ladies, if you are watching, hop on over to Facebook. You can book a mentorship or a reading, and definitely join my Facebook group, Divining Women. We have a live Q&A every Thursday night, and it's a ton of fun. I stay on and we answer everybody's questions. All right, thanks. So let's dive in now. A little bit of background. I had chronic Lyme, and the night I knew I was gonna die, I astral traveled on command, which I'd never done before, but I was really out of options. I'd spent the year before with a walker and a cane and endless IV bags with a port in my arm, and I was dying. And that night, I had been to the ER that day. I knew it was going to happen that night, and my friends did too. I had to wait them out. They kept calling the next person to sit with me, and I was very quiet. I waited till they left. Kind of like how a dog likes to drag itself into the bushes to have some privacy to die, that's how I felt. But while I was crawling up the stairs that night, like I always did, I had an intuitive epiphany, which was, Susan, get out of your body. You've got one last shot. Get out of your body and find help. I had no idea how I was going to do this, but I was all in because my intention from the beginning was to get some kind of cosmic AAA, get some help with healing, and then get back so I could continue to raise my kids. Somehow I pulled this off, and I'll do a video about how. And if you'd like to hear the details about my near-death experience, it's linked below. There is a video where I go into detail about everything that happened on this epic journey. It involves the void, it involves God, Jesus, and my guides. It was amazing. So once I ended up with God, one thing was very clear. I felt what God was made of. I covered this in the video before. And that is capital L love and capital L light. And I also mentioned that viscerally, how this love and light felt was most like freedom, even more so than love. And that's because I think down here, when it comes to love, there are so many different cultural norms and expectations and personal experiences everyone has. There are so many roles that we each play. God's love was so impossibly pure that I struggled to put that word on it, but it is the best word I would know how to say. But here's the deal. I had many, many deep epiphanies from this experience. I was completely aware the entire time. I never lost my personality. I never lost this vehicle of Susan Dyer and my ego and my preferences, and most of all, my lifelong fear. God's first question to me was, do you want to stay or go? And that just ignited that fear all the more. I was so afraid for some reason that makes no sense to me now, post this experience. But in the moment, I thought, oh my goodness, what if he doesn't believe me? What if he just deems me too far gone with my illness to really, hey, Susan, you gave it your best shot, but let's be realistic here. Your time has come, right? Anyway, the truth was he asked me. It was my choice, and I was very clear. So beyond this question and beyond everything that we talked about, and that's the thing, we had a huge, sweeping, meaning impossibly broad and expansive conversation, yet it was also absolutely more intimate even than it would be with a best friend. And that was my experience with God, that He is everything. Every possible way of being, there is a spectrum. There is a point of polarity or opposite, right? Even with His feeling of love, that feeling of love was so pure that, and I talked about this in another video, it was like, I knew God was not purely an emotionally based being. I could feel that love was so impossibly pure that to me, God felt like He was the full spectrum of sentience. He was sentient, absolutely, but He was also non-sentient, that He is all, capital A, all, everything and its opposite, all together, all as one, like capital O1. So being viscerally in His presence, much like a tea bag steeps in a mug of tea, even through my fear, what I was able to discern was, okay, what I'm feeling is actually what God is made of. And God, to me, as I've said before, God appeared as blazing infinite rays of golden light. He felt like freedom. And again, I knew He was made of love and light. And being in this presence, being immersed in His presence, one of the most random truths that I discerned, this is even with my wild fear present, I knew in that moment as we spoke, I knew I could have just murdered 10 people. I could have just murdered a string of people, and that would not have impacted the way I was greeted by God whatsoever. That may sound shocking, but if you hear me out, I trust you'll ultimately find some seriously meaningful comfort in this realization. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean that God, his reaction to me, it never changed. He did not react to my fear. Though we talked and it was so intimate, He did not change. He emitted only one frequency. There were no shades of gray. There were no vacillations. He exists immovably. The way that I was greeted in this love and light had nothing to do with me. The way I was received had nothing to do with the fact that I'm Susan and I've lived this way and I've made these choices and I believe this and I've done this. It did not. It had nothing to do with me. God simply is. And I happened to somehow get up there in His presence. But I was absolutely aware that it had nothing to do with me. That there was absolutely no judgment to God, that God simply is. And again, I knew this to the point where I actually thought to myself, while talking to Him, I could have just murdered a bunch of people and it actually wouldn't matter. Who knew? Because I had worshipped fear my entire life, and I know that's why I had that realization. Every single one of my realizations during this experience was perfectly on purpose. It was all of it designed to launch me from this sticking point I'd had in my life, which is, all right, I'm psychic. Well, how does that help another person? All right, I've had these tremendous and insane human experiences. I've actually crashed and burned at rock bottom level so many times, and I know there's something helpful in there for my fellows, but what? None of it made sense to me in a meaningful way. And I had not wanted to be on earth for decades. And that started from when I was little, when I was so afraid of everything I was seeing. And I grew to ultimately believe that I was broken and weird and unlovable. I kind of took that deranged self-belief, and so many of us actually hatch that kind of a belief. They're called core beliefs. They're very common. We do the best we can as kids, but we really have limited resources through which to understand anything that's happening. I already had this love for God. I already believed that at our core, each of us had some awesome and unique way of being of loving service to our fellows. Like, that was as far as my idea of a purpose went. I was like, well, I do believe that at its core, whatever each of our purposes are, it roots in loving service. Yet I looked back at my life, and some of it was just so extraordinary and so intense, and I had done so much work and transmuted so much. But I still could not understand how to frame it all in such a way where I really tapped into the uniquely useful channel that was from my life experiences. I couldn't put it together. And of course I couldn't, because I was too busy worshiping fear. I was so afraid of my day-to-day existence. I drank to kind of shove it all away. I never spoke about it. I camouflaged huge swaths of myself. I would talk openly about spirituality, but never about all this stuff. Because I knew, if you really knew the way I experienced life and what it is I believe and everything that happened to me, that you would flee. And this fear of being judged and of what you would think of me, and this fear of just living out loud, authentically, this fear ruled every decision I ever made. So of course I was profoundly confused and I was profoundly stuck. And of course I did not feel a great will to live. All of these absolute crash and burns in my life, it was all from that worshiping of that illusion of fear. It was all from that self-reflection that had become a belief that I was absolutely too broken for anyone's love. So this experience, it was divinely purposed, divinely timed, obviously, and it surgically spoke to all of my sticking points. And when I was able to wake up from this experience, all at once, I knew that fear was not real, that it was a human vehicle. All of a sudden, I knew that there was no judgment. Back in the day, like, I haven't drank for 18 years. I used to drink my ass off. It was like a safety blanket. It felt like a magical potion. It felt like an insulative magic potion. And I would think to myself, I hope God doesn't see me now. I hope he's not looking. I hope he doesn't see me. Well, he did see me because I am him. Yet now I know there is not possibly even an ounce of judgment. Ever. And when I say that we had a conversation, even that's a misleading description, because there was no separation between God and myself. A conversation kind of implies that there's distance between both parties for that information to be exchanged. Well, we did not speak. It was just an effortless exchange that was like one being on top of the other. There was nothing going back and forth. I had just plugged in to the socket. It was me finally in reunion with the greatest energetic form of me. So I don't know if that's making sense, but that's how I was able to so specifically and viscerally feel certain of these truths about the nature of God. And yes, I know that they were gleaned just perfectly for me, but I also believe that I had promised God following this experience. I had promised him I was all in. I had promised him I'll do it. I will live transparently. My most absolutely frightening thing. I'd never want to be saying this in front of you. I'd never want to be talking about this, ever. I have terrible fears and insecurities, and this really is of my oldest one. I am now revealing to everybody just how weird I am. How am I ever gonna date like this? Like, hi, yeah, I meditate in a copper pyramid, and I usually actually wear some crystals like on my head and on my chakras. And so do you think that's kind of cool, or maybe you kind of think this is weird, right? That's how my brain thinks. But I promised God I'd be all in, use me up, I'll go completely transparently, and I will help those women who resonate with this. And that's what I'm doing. So I also know not only were these realizations perfectly for me to launch me out of these illusions that had really had me feeling stuck, but I also know that these were the ideal realizations for me to have as I was going to come back, resurrect, and help others to explore along spiritual lines. So this is huge. There is no judgment whatsoever. There is nothing to fear. God's presence does not change no matter what. God simply is. I just happen to be there in it, immersed with it in this way, which I'm sure was not even accurate, but that's the best way I can describe it. There was no separation. It had just been like me plugging back into the socket, being fully home. And I could have just murdered a slew of people, and I would have been greeted in the exact same way. Random thought to have in the middle of this insanely epic experience, but I'm so grateful I did, because to me, that is phenomenal news. And I hope that you draw just as much comfort from this as I do still today. I hope you liked this video. This is a 13-part series. And in my next video, I talk about how it felt to be up there and know I was wholly loved just as I am, just as you are, no matter what. Which again is so profoundly comforting. So stay tuned for that. Be sure to like this video, share it with anybody who you might think could use this kind of an uplifting God shot. And if you're a woman, join me over on Facebook. Be sure to subscribe, hit that bell so you get a notification when I upload a new video. All my thanks and love. I'm so grateful you're here, and I will see you in the next video.